Hey guys, welcome to Free Coding. Today we're gonna see about how to use for loop and different situations where you can mainly use for loop. Again, loop for loop is one of the loops that you use to repeat a certain task, and where you can use for loop is wherever you have where you know a finite number of times a particular task has to repeat. In such situations, you can go for using a for loop. So, you know, you have a keyword called for, and followed by that, you can write your statement. And when we discussed about while loop, I said there are three things that you need to keep in mind, right? Initializing the variable, writing the condition, loop condition, and finally updating a variable. But here, you don't need to update and you don't need to initialize a variable. You can simply write the variable in the condition directly. Your interpreter, when you're using a for loop, it initializes the variable automatically. Also, after end of every loop, that variable gets updated automatically. So let me take you through an example on how you can write your for loop statement. Here you go. For I in range 0, 10. Range is one of the built-in functions in Python. So when I say range of 0, 10, which means it contains numbers from 0 through 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 0 being the lower bound here, 9, 10 being the upper bound. And the interpreter would not include the upper bound, it would include upper bound minus 1. But you also have third argument, which is an optional one. If no arguments are mentioned here, it's going to increase by 1. If it is mentioned, it's going to increase by that number. So when I say 2, then it's going to increase by 2 every time. So for now, let's just focus on this example. For I in range 0, 10. So I is going to go from 0 through 9 and going to print that number. So I'm going to just print numbers from 0 to 9. So print I, and here variable gets initialized automatically to 0. And after printing I at the end of the loop, I gets increased by 1 by default. So let me run this. And you can see this code has printed numbers from 0 to 9. Now say I have 2 and run it. So now it has increased by 2 every time. So I is initially 0, printed 0, and then I gets increased by 2 next time. So printed 2, and then 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 6, 6 becomes 8. And we also have something called end command that you can write within your print statement. So when you use print inside a for loop, it is going to print every time in a different line. But say you want to print it in the same line. In that situation, what you could do is at the end of this print statement, add a comma and then write end equal to and use any special character. Any character would work. So since I've used space, but make sure do it within a quotation or enclose it with quotation. So that space would be created after printing I. And then your cursor would not go to the next line because of the end command. Your cursor would stay in the same line and continue with it. Like this. So here it printed one by one below the other, but here it printed in the same line. That's because of the end command. So say I'm gonna add at. So you get, at printer after printing every number. And here are the main examples where you can use for loop. One major place where you can use a for loop is when you want to iterate through a sequence. When I say iterate through the sequence could be anything, it could be a string, a list, a tuple, set would also work here, and even dictionary would work. So if you want to perform a certain action for each and every item in a sequence, then you can use for loop. So that's nothing but iterating through, traversing through a sequence can also be said. And I have a list here, which is named as name list. So I've assigned 4 different items to it, separated it by comma. And how would the interpreter know that this is a list? By looking at the square bracket, since I've enclosed all the items within square brackets. So now I have written my for loop command as for I in name list. So I is gonna carry each and every item in name list and gonna perform this action, whatever is inside the loop. I forgot to tell one thing, you have to follow the same syntax that you used in while loop. You have to end the for loop statement with a colon, and whatever lines you want to repeat has to go within the within the loop by having indentation in the beginning. All right, now coming back to this list concept. So I is going to carry the first item in the name list. So since list is, a list follows index numbers, it's going to iterate through the sequence in an order. So going to go to the first item and then second and then third, goes in the order likewise. So I is going to carry Tom. Okay. And then print Tom, and I is going to carry John. So it's going to print John. So the I gets updated automatically, and it's going to go through each and every item in the sequence only once. It would not visit the same item that it has visited already. So Tom, John, Lisa, and Joe. Here I have a tuple, and how do I say this is a tuple? Is by having a parenthesis, enclosing all the items with a parenthesis. So iterate through a tuple. So since tuple is also a sequence, you can iterate through it. So for I in tuple, name tuple, print I. So as long as there are items in the tuple, it's going to print that. But if there are no more items in the tuple, that's when the loop is going to exit. So Tom, John, Lisa, Joe. And here I'm gonna print it or iterate through another sequence called string here. Like I said, string would also come under sequence data type. So you're gonna print, but here you don't have different items. You have characters here or substrings here, which your interpreter is gonna print. So for I in name string, so I is gonna carry the first item, and then the second character, and then third character, and fourth character. I'm gonna print one by one. So if I add, end in here, then I'm gonna print everything in one line. All right. Now we have set here. So we have come across set. If you want to know about set, you can, check out one of the videos that would come under introduction to Python. So set is nothing but another data types in Python that you could use to store items. But what makes it to stand out from other data types is you cannot have duplicated items in here, and it does not have index numbers. So it's going to give you a random item in a random order. It would never give you it in a proper ordered manner, since we don't have the concept of index here. So when I say for I in name set, let me rename it to set. And how do you call this as a set is by looking at the brackets and curly brackets we have, but your dictionary does have curly brackets, right? So, but another thing that makes it different is this set does not have keys here. So just the values. And for I in name set, print I. So this is gonna print all the items from set, but in a random order. It's never gonna follow how I am storing it inside it. And I also have something called else statement. This is an optional one. This is just for the programmers, developers to understand where your loop ends. So no matter what, whether the loop runs or not, no matter how many times it runs, does not matter. Your else is gonna get executed. So it printed Joe, John, Lisa, and Tom. So as you can see, it printed in a random order. And finally, it printed no more items in the list, no more items in the set. Let me change that. Got it? Now, another example of having a for loop is iterating through another sequence called dictionary. So I have a dictionary here. Again, how do I say this is a dictionary? Is by having the curly brackets and also having key value pair. So my keys are 1, 2, 3, and 4, and my values are Tom, John, Lisa, and Joe. So for I in name list, as you can see, we just not have one thing in there. We have key value pair. We have two things in one item. But when you try to, iterate through a dictionary without mentioning what you want to iterate, it would by default print only the keys, as you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are keys. So it just printed keys. But if you want to mention values, you can use the method dot values. Namelist dot values would print only the values. So Tom, John, Lisa, and Joe. Now say you want to have items together, then you have to make sure you use the method items that would print all together. One being the key, Tom is the value, same goes for remaining items. And we also have this else part. Like I said before, does not matter whether your for loop is going to run or not, or no matter how many times it runs, your else part would get executed saying no more items in the dictionary. Now, we did see about break command, right? That is applicable here as well. So break is the statement. Now say, I'm going to print items, but as soon as it reaches 5, it has to exit from the loop. Okay, so I have a list of items here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 5. But as soon as it's going to print all the items, still it reaches 5. But as soon as it reaches 5, it's going to break. So what I can do is, if I is equivalent to 5, break. So break is going to let the interpreter exit from the loop. So it printed only items till 4. So the one that comes after 4 is 5, since your I is going to carry 5 after reaching 4 or after printing 4, right? So when I is carrying 5, interpreter is going to check whether it is equivalent to 5 or not. If so, it's going to break from there. But say you don't want to break. You want to print all the items except 5. In that case, you can use another jump statement called continue. Continue is gonna skip that particular iteration and continue with the next one. So whenever I reach, or the value or the variable I reaches 5 or contains 5, it's gonna skip that and continue with the remaining. So it's gonna skip this, continue with 6. And then skip this 5, continue with 4, 3, 1, and then skip another 5 at the end. So there you go. So this did not print any items that had 5 in it. So whenever you want to skip any particular items or any particular items with any certain conditions, or that satisfies any certain conditions, you could go for continue. That would simply skip from that particular iteration, jump to the next iteration in the list or in the sequence. So that's it with for loop. Mainly for loop is used when you know how many times your loop is gonna run, or when you want to iterate through a sequence, which means when you want to apply a certain task on each and every item in the sequence. So with this, we have come to an end of using for loops in Python. We're gonna see in the next video with a different concept. Bye, take care.